There is a strange fear that comes with being admired. Not disliked, not misunderstood, admired. Because admiration can become a room you are afraid to leave. People begin to know a version of you, charming, beautiful, composed, impressive, and after a while that version starts making demands. It wants to be protected, it wants to be repeated, it wants you to hide whatever does not match. And one of the most unsettling things about the Picture of Dorian Gray is that it understands this before we have the language for it. Oscar Wilde gives us a young man who is loved for the surface of himself. His face becomes a kind of passport. His beauty enters rooms before his conscience can. People are drawn to him, forgive him, project onto him, excuse him, and then the novel asks a very quiet, very dangerous question. What if the person everyone admires is not the real you? What if that person is the thing slowly destroying you? Dorian Gray begins as someone being looked at, that matters. Before he becomes a symbol, before he becomes a warning, before the portrait becomes grotesque and famous, he is a young man caught in other people's gazes. Basil sees him as beauty, as inspiration, almost as revelation. Lord Henry sees him as an experiment, a mind to influence, a life to aestheticize, a soul to test with clever ideas. Dorian is not simply vain from the beginning. The more painful reading is that he is teachable. He learns what his beauty means because others teach him to value it. He learns that youth can be worshipped. He learns that charm can make the world softer around him. He learns that appearance is not just something people notice, it is power. And once he understands that, he wants the impossible, to keep the admired self untouched while everything else pays the price. That is the bargain at the centre of the novel. The portrait will change instead of him. It will carry age, cruelty, corruption, guilt. Dorian will keep the face the world loves. The image hidden away will become the record of what he refuses to carry in public. This is why the portrait is more than a supernatural device. It is not just a magic object in a Gothic story. It is the one witness that cannot be charmed. Everyone else can be confused. Everyone else can be impressed. Everyone else can be kept at a distance by beauty, status, wit, money, rooms, manners, reputation. But the portrait knows. It knows what has been done. It knows what has been ignored. It knows what Dorian has trained the world not to see. And that is what makes it frightening. Not that it becomes ugly, but that it becomes honest. Most of us will never have a painting locked in an upstairs room, changing shape with every private betrayal. But the metaphor is uncomfortably easy to understand. We know what it is to maintain a version of ourselves. We know the small edits, the smile that says everything is fine, the story that leaves out the worst part, the polished answer, the flattering angle, the public self that has learned which parts receive approval and which parts make people uncomfortable. The novel does not condemn beauty because beauty is bad. That would be too simple, and Wilde is not simple. Beauty in this book is magnetic. It is real. It has force. It gives pleasure. It makes people stop and look. The danger is not beauty itself. The danger is what beauty can protect. Dorian's face becomes a shelter from consequence. It lets him move through the world as if his inner life has not changed. The more damaged the hidden self becomes, the more precious the visible self becomes. The surface must remain perfect because the surface is now doing all the moral work he refuses to do. That is a terrible way to live, not because it fools no one. It fools many people. That is the point. It is terrible because it leaves Dorian alone with the only thing that sees him clearly. The portrait becomes his conscience, but not the gentle kind. It does not advise him. It does not forgive him. It does not tell him how to return, it simply shows him the truth he has separated from his face, and the longer he looks away, the more monstrous that truth becomes. This is where Lord Henry's influence matters. He does not force Dorian into ruin with a knife in his hand. He does something subtler. He gives Dorian a language that makes irresponsibility sound elegant. He turns life into a performance of sensations. He makes detachment feel intelligent. He speaks in bright, dangerous sentences that seem to free Dorian from ordinary morality. But ideas are not harmless just because they are beautifully phrased. One of the chilling things about the novel is how easily style can become permission. Lord Henry's wit gives Dorian a way to look at his own life from a distance. Pain becomes interesting, people become experiences, consequences become vulgar, the self becomes a project of taste, and once a person starts treating life only as art, other people can become material. That is where the book refuses to remain merely decorative. It may be full of beautiful rooms, flowers, music, perfumes, polished conversation, and exquisite surfaces. But under all of that is a question about responsibility. What do you owe to the people who are harmed by your self-invention? What do you owe to the truth when lying keeps you beloved? What happens to a soul that is never allowed to appear on the face? Dorian does not only want pleasure, he wants the pleasures of corruption without the evidence of having been corrupted. He wants the freedom to damage his life and other lives, while still receiving the world's admiration as if nothing has happened. That is the fantasy the portrait grants him. And that is why the fantasy curdles. The admired self becomes a prison because it cannot confess. It cannot age into wisdom. It cannot be humbled. It cannot say, "I was wrong, I am changed, I have hurt people, I need to become someone else." It can only stay beautiful. At first, that sounds like power. Eventually it sounds like a curse, because to be human is not only to be seen at our best, it is to be able to survive being seen truthfully, with the bruise, the regret, the history, the contradiction. Dorian's tragedy is not simply that his soul becomes ugly. It is that he chooses a life where the soul must be hidden so the image can remain adored. The novel understands that admiration is not the same as being known. You can be admired from a distance and still be profoundly unseen. You can be desired, praised, envied, discussed, painted, followed, remembered, and still have no honest place to put your guilt. That is why the locked room matters. Every admired self needs somewhere to put what admiration cannot hold. For Dorian, it is the portrait. For other people, it may be silence, defensiveness, performance, denial, endless reinvention. The form changes, the split is familiar. A public self that keeps winning, a private self that keeps decaying, and a door between them that becomes harder and harder to open. There is also something deeply sad in Basil's role. Basil sees Dorian with reverence, but not clearly enough to protect him. His love, his art, his awe, all of it helps create the image Dorian becomes trapped inside. He recognizes that the portrait contains something dangerous because it contains too much feeling, but by then, the looking has already begun. The world of the novel is full of people looking, judging, admiring, gossiping. And Dorian learns to live inside that gaze until he mistakes it for life itself. That is what makes the Picture of Dorian Gray last beyond its famous premise. It is not just the story of a man who stays young while a painting grows hideous. It is the story of what happens when a person gives the world a beautiful surface and then begins sacrificing everything to keep that surface believable. The book asks whether the self we display can become a rival to the self we actually are, and it suggests that the answer is yes. Not all at once, Not dramatically at first. It happens through small permissions, through flattering attention, through clever excuses, through the relief of not being caught, through the pleasure of being admired more than being honest. Then one day the hidden thing has a face, and you recognize it. Or worse, you don't. This is why the ending feels less like punishment than exposure. The separation cannot hold forever. The body and the soul, the image and the truth, the admired self and the hidden self, they cannot remain strangers without violence. Dorian wants to destroy the evidence, but the evidence is not only the painting. The evidence is what he has become, and that is the part the novel will not let him escape. Maybe that is the uncomfortable mercy of the book. It does not let beauty have the final word. It does not let charm be mistaken for innocence. It does not let admiration replace conscience. It tells us that the hidden self is still part of the self. What we conceal still shapes us. What we refuse to confess still lives somewhere. And if we build our whole life around being admired, we may slowly lose the harder, quieter gift of being real. The Picture of Dorian Gray stays with us because its horror is not only supernatural, it is social, it is emotional, it is private. It understands the temptation to let the world love a version of us that costs us less honesty. It understands the relief of being seen beautifully and the terror of being seen completely. And it leaves us with a question that does not belong only to Dorian. If the most admired version of you had to stand beside the truest version of you, would they recognize each other, or would one of them have to be hidden away?